Hey everyone, welcome to Homeschool. Hope everybody are doing good. And today I'm here with a good news for all the students who are going to write 2022 Class 10 board examination. You can be a student of CBSE or you can be a student of any state board like Karnataka State Board. Syllabus is common. The chapters that you have to study is common, right? So I have come up with one shot revision videos on all science chapters which is there for class 10. So it can be a great help for you all. So I'll be covering every concept in a brief way, right, in my one shot revision videos. Today I will start with the chapter Heredity and Evolution. Already every concept was completely explained in a very detailed way. Video playlist links are provided in the description. If you want, you can go and check it out. And coming to Heredity and Evolution, one of the most important chapters under class 10 biology. So you can expect a lot of application questions from this chapter. So definitely you need to understand the concept very well. Only then you can answer the questions that come from this particular chapter. So here I am with a complete revision on heredity and evolution. Let's revise every concept that is there under heredity and later we will go for evolution. And coming to heredity, so we all know heredity is nothing but process of passing traits, that is characters, from parents to offsprings is called heredity, right? So in short, it's very easy. So we are going to learn how actually the traits or characters getting passed from parents to offsprings. So all that we will discuss under heredity. Fine. So here Gregor Mendel, who was the father of genetics, this scientist have done two beautiful experiments to make you understand. See, we learn those experiments also, and from those experiments we will understand how actually characters are getting passed from parents to offsprings. So for his experiment, he selected garden pea plant. So the first aspect is about garden pea plant, which is also called as Pisum sativum, right? So scientific word or scientific name for garden pea plant is Pisum sativum, right? So he selected this plant to study about heredity, right? So why did he selected garden pea plant for studying heredity? So there are three main reasons here. So they are important. So it can be asked as a 2-mark question, guys. So they'll ask you, why did Mendel selected garden pea plant for studying, heredity? So the first reason is it is easy to grow. So you can grow it very easily, right? So that is first reason. Second one is it has short lifespan. Lifespan is very short, so that he can observe many generations. He can able to study many generations, so that when he studies many generations, he can clearly come to know how actually the traits are getting passed from parents to offsprings. So to observe many generation, lifespan of a plant that is going to study have to be short. So garden pea plant has a short lifespan, so he selected this plant. And most importantly, it will show 7 contrasting characters. Contrasting characters. So contrasting characters in the sense opposite characters. So what are the 7 contrasting characters that a garden pea plant can show? The first contrasting character is height of a plant, right? So plant height, it can be tall or it can be dwarf, right? So tall character is always dominant and dwarf character is recessive, right? So second character that he observed in a plant is, color of flower. Color of flower. See, flower color, it can be violet or it can be white or violet or red, you can say, right? So this is the contrasting character that you observe with respect to flower color. Coming to third contrasting character, it is seed color. So seed color, it can be yellow or it can be green, right? Then fourth character is seed shape. Seed shape can be round or wrinkled, right? Seed can be round or it can be wrinkled. Coming to fifth character, it is position of flower. Position of flower. See, flower position can be axial or it can be terminal, right? Fine. And coming to sixth character, it is shape of pod. So pod is something in which actually peas are located, right? So pod shape can be inflated. It can be inflated, that is, it can be smooth or it can be constricted, right? And coming to the last character, it is color of pod. So pod color can be yellow or pod color can be green, right? So whatever the characters I have shown first, I mean, in case of height, tall. In case of flower color, violet. In case of seed color, yellow. In case of seed shape, round. All these are dominant characters. Okay, so at least you have to remember 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 contrasting characters are must, because relating to this, questions can be asked more frequently. So at least you must know height, tall is dominant, dwarf is recessive. Flower color, violet is dominant, white is recessive. Seed color, yellow is dominant, green is recessive. Seed shape, round is dominant, wrinkled is recessive. So at least 4 characters I would recommend you to remember. Okay, and which is dominant and which is recessive. Fine. It is because of these reasons, Mendel selected garden pea plant to study about heredity. Fine. So how did he study about heredity? It is by doing experiments. So what are the 2 experiments Mendel has done here? The first one is he did monohybrid cross. He did monohybrid cross. Right. So what do you mean by monohybrid cross? In this monohybrid cross, only one character was studied. Okay. So he studied about one contrasting character. Okay, so he selected one of the contrasting character and he observed how this character is getting passed from parents to offspring. So studying about only one contrasting character is called monohybrid cross. So he selected the contrasting character height with respect to height. Okay, so what he did was he took one pure tall plant. Okay, he crossed with pure dwarf plant. Pure dwarf plant. So this is actually the phenotype that he selected. What do you mean by phenotype? Phenotype in the sense how a plant looks externally. So how you can see the plant with your eyes externally. Okay, so externally when you look at a plant, you can observe whether it is tall or short, right? So that external appearance is represented with a word phenotype. Okay, so phenotype of a plant that he crossed was pure tall plant crossed with pure dwarf plant. Okay, so now we will have to mention something called genotype. So what do you mean by genotype? So what is the genes they have for pure tallness? So pure tall in the sense homozygous tall. Homozygous in the sense what? Both alleles similar. Okay, so this is how genes are represented with certain alphabetical letters. So when we write capitals, it means I'm talking about dominant gene. Okay, so homozygous means 2 alleles, one gene, one pair of genes. So this is a pair of gene. Okay, controls one character. So among the pair, one letter, one is called one allele, the other one is called other allele. So if both alleles are same, we say it is homozygous condition. Okay, so homozygous tall when crossed with homozygous dwarf. So for recessive character, I use small letters. Okay, so here what are the gametes formed here? So gamete will have one of the allele, isn't it? So whatever may be the gamete here, that will have allele capital T. So here the gamete will have one of the allele. So when two gametes are fused, you will get a plant having a genotype capital T small t. That means in F1 generation, you will get all tall plants. Okay, fine. So actually you took one of the parent was pure dwarf, but in F1 generation, you are getting all tall plants because all plants have a genotype capital T small t. Since dominant allele is there, it will get expressed. So that is the reason all tall plants you had got in F1 generation. Okay, so now F2 generation. So I will take plants having capital T small t. Okay, so we will conduct self pollination here. Okay, so in F2 generation, this plant is pollinated with capital T small t again. Okay, so whatever the plants you got in F1 generation, when they are self pollinated, you know what do you get? So here you get the gamete. The gamete can have either capital T allele or the gamete can have small t. Here also the gamete can have capital T or the gamete can have small t. Okay, so how do you represent the plants that you obtain in F2 generation? So for F2 generation plants to see, we will do a Punnett square, or we can also call it as checkerboard. So how do you do a checkerboard? So the gametes of one parent, let me write it this way. Okay, so the gametes of another parent, let me write it this way. Okay, so that is vertically, capital T, small t. So just combine. So what is a plant? You will get a plant with a genotype, capital T, capital T. So this is tall. And next, capital T, small t. So this also grows as a taller plant because dominant gene, capital T is there, that gets expressed. Coming to next one, capital T, small t. So combine this with this, you get small t, small t. So this is also tall plant, whereas this will be dwarf plant, isn't it? So what is the phenotypic ratio here? This is very, very important, guys. So phenotypic ratio. So how many tall and how many dwarf plant you had got here? 3 tall plants and 1 dwarf plant. So phenotypic ratio is 3:1. Similarly, what is genotypic ratio here? So how many different genotypes you had got here? So one was capital T, and then 2 capital T, small t you had got, and then 1 small t, right? So 1:2:1 is the genotypic ratio. So this is what we call monohybrid cross. So they would ask you the question, what is monohybrid cross? Explain with an example. So you have to write the definition of monohybrid cross and then explain the full process. Okay, so you have to show what are the parents you have taken, show the plants that you obtain in F1 generation, and then okay, so you take the plants obtained in F1 generation and do a self-pollination. So later, mention the checkerboard or Punnett square, and finally mention what is phenotypic ratio and genotypic ratio. And about this alone, 1 mark or MCQ question can be asked. So this is one of the experiment conducted by Mendel. Okay, so that is monohybrid cross. So now we will go for studying the second experiment conducted by Mendel, that is dihybrid cross. So what do you mean by dihybrid cross? Studying about 2 contrasting characters. Okay, so in dihybrid cross, we actually study 2 contrasting character, right? So previously we have seen how one character was getting passed from one generation to another generation. Now we will study the 2 contrasting characters at a time. Okay, so how these characters gets passed from one generation to another generation. See, when we take plant having round yellow seeds, crossbred with wrinkled green seeds, okay. So how do you write their genotypes here? Round yellow, round is a dominant character, yellow is also dominant character with respect to seed color, isn't it? So this is a character with respect to seed color, and round and wrinkled is the character with respect to seed shape. So two characters we have taken, and we will try to understand how these characters are getting passed from one generation to another generation. Okay, so round is a dominant character with respect to seed shape. So what is the genotype I can write? Capital R. And yellow is the dominant character with respect to seed color. So we write the genotype capital Y. So this is the genotype of this parent. And similarly, both are recessive character. When I took round as capital R, then its recessive character is wrinkled. So I have to use small r. At the same time, green is also recessive character only. So when I take yellow as capital Y, then I'll be taking green as small y. So these are the genotypes of parents. And coming to gametes. So in case of gametes, among the two allele, one allele only can get passed. Similarly, in this set of a gene, one allele only will get passed. So gamete can have a gene RY, capital Y. At the same time, here also the gametes can have a gene small r, capital Y. So when both gametes combine, the plant which you get it in F1 generation will have a genotype capital R, capital Y, small y. So that what will be the phenotype of F1 generation plants? So all plants are actually, they bear round yellow seeds, right? So all plants that you get in F1 generation will have round yellow, because the dominant trait gets expressed, right? Fine. And now let us do F2 generation. So for F2 generation, what we will do is we will do cross pollination among these plants. Okay, so here we will be taking capital R, capital Y, small y. I'll self-bred with capital R, capital Y, small y. Okay, so what are the gametes that you get it here? So gamete can have this, this R and this Y, right? So gamete can have this gene, or gamete can have capital R, small y, right? This small r and capital Y can combine, so gamete can have this, or gamete can also have small r, small y alleles, isn't it? So similarly, the same gametes are possible here also. So capital R, capital Y, capital R, small r, capital Y, and small r, small y. So these are the gametes of one parent, and these are the gametes of another parent. So let us do a checkerboard to observe what are the different plants that you get in F2 generation. So doing a checkerboard is very, very important, guys, particularly for the dihybrid cross. Okay, so you need to mention the phenotypic ratio, and you will have to mention the different varieties of plants that you get it in F2 generation. Okay, so let's do a checkerboard. Let me write gametes of this parent like this horizontally. Okay, so capital R, capital Y, right? And then capital R, small y, small r, capital Y, then small r, small y. So, and then gametes of this parent, let me write it vertically, capital R, capital Y, and then capital R, small y, small r, capital Y, small r, small y. Okay, so let me combine this with this. So what do I get? Capital R, capital Y, capital Y. So that what type of a plant is this? This is round yellow. isn't it? And then capital R, capital Y, small y, right? So even this plant is round yellow, right? So like that you will have to do all, just combine this with this, write down, combine this with this, write down. Okay, so when you do all the varieties, so you can do it. Okay, so pause the video and try to write down all the varieties, and straight away I'll mention the varieties of plants that you get it. Okay, see, round yellow plants that you get it in F2 generation is 9. Similarly, round green plants that you get it in F2 generation is 3. And you will get wrinkled yellow variety. Wrinkled yellow variety you will get 3, and very different plant that you get, that is wrinkled green variety. Okay, so wrinkled green variety 1. So the phenotypic ratio of F2 generation is 9:3:3:1. So this is really very important, guys. So I left this work for you. Okay, so just combine and see, these are the varieties of plants you get. Phenotypic ratio 9:3:3:1. And if you observe the varieties of plant, you know one variety which is very, very different, right? Actually, what were the parents you took here for F2 generation? Round yellow. Like a parent, you know, round yellow, 9 varieties you have observed, right? And round green also you have got, wrinkled yellow you have got, and wrinkled green you have got, right? So this proves that the traits are independently inherited. Say they'll ask you a question, how do you show the traits are independently inherited? Then you will have to explain this dihybrid cross itself. Okay, so dihybrid cross proves that traits are independently inherited. Okay, so independently inherited. Actually, this is what we call Mendel's law of independent assortment. So this is the third Mendel's law. Based on these two experiments, Mendel has given 3 laws. They are law of segregation, right? Then law of dominance, and third law is law of independent assortment. Independent assortment, right? So these are the 3 laws Mendel has given based on his this monohybrid cross and dihybrid cross experiment. What do you mean by law of segregation? Law of segregation tells you that during gamete formation, alleles get separated. You see, one character, round character, is controlled by this pair of genes. But when gamete was forming, among a pair, only one allele will go. Okay, one of the pair itself will go, right? So alleles gets separated during gamete formation. This itself we will call it as law of segregation. And coming to next law, law of dominance. What do you mean by law of dominance? You see here F1 generation. Okay, so you had got an allele for dominant gene and you had got an allele for recessive gene. But the dominant allele gets expressed. The dominant gene gets expressed, right? So among the two allele, okay, the one which is dominant will always get expressed in the offspring generation. This is what we call law of dominance. And then what is law of independent assortment? This itself. See, we had taken the parents round yellow here for the F2 generation. But the varieties of plants we get here is not just the round yellow, other varieties also we had got. That means the alleles have independent existence. Okay, so they can be inherited independently. Okay, so that is what was proved from this dihybrid cross. Okay, so this itself we will call it as law of independent assortment. So they'll ask you how our traits are independently inherited. So for this question, you have to do the entire dihybrid cross and show. That itself is your answer. Okay, fine. So hope you are clear with monohybrid cross and dihybrid cross. Now let's discuss about sex determination in humans. Hey, here first thing that you must know is the sex chromosomes present in male and female. Okay, so what are the sex chromosomes present in male? So in male you have XY, right? Heterozygous condition you will observe. Similarly, sex chromosomes in case of female are homozygous, X and X, right? So the difference between the male sex chromosomes and female sex chromosomes is important. And how can one determine sex in case of humans? So whether the chances of getting boy child is higher or chances of getting girl child is higher? Actually, it's 50%, isn't it? So how do you work that? See, the male which has got XY, okay, when crossed with female who has got the sex chromosomes X and X, so the male one will produce the gametes X and Y. The female one always produces the gametes XX. So when this XX combined, okay, so the father's X chromosome when combined with mother's X, you get XX, which is a girl, which leads to a girl. And then when this X combines with this X, you will again get a girl. So when X combines with a Y, so XY, that means you get a boy. And this Y when combined with this X, you will get again XY, that is boy. So this probability of getting girl and a boy is just 50%, right? And most importantly, sex of a child is determined by a father. How and why? It's because mother always produces X, but father can have a gamete with X or he can have a gamete with Y. It all depends on which gamete of father combines with mother's gamete, isn't it? So if a father's gamete with X combines with mother's gamete with X, you get a girl. But instead of that, if father's gamete having Y chromosome combines with mother's gamete, you get a boy. So it all depends on what chromosome, like what gamete having which chromosome combines with mother's gamete, right? So that's why we say sex of a child is completely dependent on father. So it's one of the very, very important question. How do you say that sex of a child is determined by a father? It all depends on the gamete of father, right? Whether it has X chromosome or Y chromosome. Based on that, gender can be decided, right? So this is all about sex determination in humans. So this is one part of a chapter that we have learned. And coming to next part of the chapter, that is evolution. So let's talk the different aspects of evolution. So what is evolution? So before we learn about the evolution, we need to know something like variation, isn't it? So variation is just opposite to heredity. Variation is nothing but the differences between parents and offsprings. Between parents and offsprings is called variation, right? So variation is actually one of the important character or one of the important process that you will observe in sexual reproduction, because sometimes variations gives variety of species in our nature, and because of these variations the newly formed organisms can survive better in a changing environment, isn't it? So that's why variation is one important process that we observe in sexual reproduction. Fine. And accumulation of variation okay, over a million years of the time, okay, over a long period of time, over million years, gives a new species, right? So this itself we will call as evolution, right? So at every generation, variation do occur, change in the DNA do occur. Actually, why do variation takes place? Another important question that you need to concentrate. Why variations occur? They occur during DNA copying. They occur during DNA copying, okay, in sexual reproduction. Okay, so when every generation certain level of variation takes place over a million years, if you collect all the variations, and when you look at the organisms that are formed, that is existing after million years of time, is completely a new organism compared to the older ones, right? So evolution is nothing but accumulation of so many variations over a million years, which completely gives a new species. Okay, so that itself we will call it as evolution, right? So we have studied about evolution with three important examples in a chapter, which we said it as three illustrations, right? So they talk about the microevolution. That means you don't get completely a new species, just how actually variation takes place in 2 or 3 generations, that we have studied with the help of examples. So let us understand those beetle example that you have studied to understand evolution. Okay. So illustrations or the different situations where we have seen the evolution, we understood about the evolution. So which are nothing but examples of variation, right? So in the first situation, we have taken, 12 red beetles, right? 12 red beetles we took, and due to some mutation in the DNA, during the sexual reproduction, they are sexually reproducing organisms. So during sexual reproduction, there occurs a change in a DNA, okay, relating to their color. So you will observe change in DNA relating to color. So as a result of that, in the next generation, one of the beetle that you observe is green. But most of the beetles that you get in the next generation is also red. Among so many red beetles, you will observe one green beetle. So gradually in the next generation, green beetle population increases. So you would observe many green beetles along with red. Okay, fine. So suddenly in the climate or in the environment, there comes crow. There comes crows, isn't it? So crows, actually these beetles, they feed on green leaves. So they always stay on green leaves. So the crow can only able to see the red colored beetles, because green color beetles gets hidden on a green leaves. Crow cannot see green beetles because they stay on green leaves. Okay, so somehow the green beetles have got natural selection. I mean, they got adapted to the environment. They have got survival advantage because nature helped the green beetles to survive in a better way. Okay, so crows can see red beetles very, very clearly. So it will try to eat all the red beetles. So in the next generation, what you observe is all green beetles. Okay, so this is one example for evolution, but this is not the evolution to a greater extent, isn't it? Say you are not getting some other species here. You have got beetles itself, only the color, the gene with respect to a color has changed, right? And how did this evolution took place? It took place because of natural selection, right? So what do you mean by natural selection? Actually, nature helps. Nature helps some species to survive is called natural selection, guys. Okay, so these green color beetles have got survival advantage. They have got survival advantage. So this is the conclusion for this experiment. Okay, so it's not an experiment, just a small example. So in from this example we can understand that a micro evolution can take place. Color, the gene with respect to color can be completely changed. So for that nature has helped, and this is what we mean by natural selection. Okay, fine. And in the second illustration, or in the second example, we have seen, we took the same 12 red beetles, okay, due to change in DNA, or due to mutation, the color, yes, the gene with respect to a color has changed. So among so many red, one beetle was blue in color. So slowly in the next generation, blue beetle population was increased. Okay, and red beetles were also there. Red beetles were also there. But all of a sudden, elephants, suppose if elephants were coming on the way, they by mistake or by chance, they kept their foot on the area where red beetles were there. So that all red beetles were dead. So the red beetles vanished just by a chance, isn't it? So some of the genes have gone away, they have completely dead. Some of the genes have completely vanished is just by a chance, isn't it? So in the next generation, what you can observe is most of the beetles, almost all the beetles that you get is blue, blue, blue. Why? Because all the red beetles were dead due to elephant's foot. Okay, so and this is another example for microevolution, and it is mainly because of genetic drift. This itself we will call it as genetic drift. So what do you mean by genetic drift? The loss of some of the genes, okay, loss of some characters or some traits just by chance or luck. Okay, so by chance or luck, the frequency in the genes become less and less. I mean, the number of genes or the number of characters becomes lesser and lesser just by chance or luck. That is called as genetic drift. Okay, and now coming to the third illustration or third example, what we studied was, we took the same red beetles, there was no change in the DNA, but imagine the leaves on which they were feeding was affected by a disease. So the trees or the plants or whatever the leaves on which they were feeding, they got affected by a disease. So as a result of that, the weight of the beetles gets reduced. The beetles become very, very thin. Actually, for some generations, as long as the disease exists, you get thinner beetles only. Okay, for few generations, you observe the formation or generation of thinner beetles. Once the plants recovered from a disease, once the disease goes away from the plant, then you get, nice healthy beetles. Okay, just like the original previous generation. Okay, but temporarily for few generations you observe the beetles with reduced weight. As long as the disease exists, thinner beetle population increases generation to generation. But once they have got recovered, they have got healthy food, then they'll become to normal. Okay, so this is the third illustration. Actually, we don't call this as evolution, right? So this is a temporary change that you will observe in some of the beetle generations. Okay, but these two illustrations are important. Here evolution happened due to natural selection, and here evolution happened due to genetic drift. Okay, so these were the three examples we studied for evolution. And now we will learn about very, very important word called speciation. Okay, so it's a very, very important question for 3 or 4 marks, guys. What is speciation and how does speciation cost? Okay, so that is how questions can be asked. So remember the question, what is speciation and how is speciation cost? So let us try to understand this word speciation and how it is caused. So what is the reason for speciation? So this I'll explain in a detailed way. Fine. So what is speciation? Process of forming new species from old ones is called speciation. So getting a new species completely from old ones is called speciation. So how is it caused? So what are the reasons for speciation here? So the first reason is natural selection. So you must explain it carefully. So 2 or 3 sentences you must write on natural selection here. Like you have to say, nature helps some of the species to survive in a better way. Those species will get natural, survival advantage, and all that you have to mention. We have seen in the illustration also what actually we mean by natural selection, isn't it? So the next reason here is genetic drift. We have seen what do you mean by genetic drift, right? Decrease of the number of genes, just by chance or luck is called as genetic drift. So the definition is very important, guys. Decrease of number of genes, okay, or traits by chance or luck is called genetic drift. Okay, so even this I explained with an example, right? And the third reason is very important, gene flow. So what do you mean by gene flow? It is the transfer of gene from one population to another population, by migration is called, gene flow. So this is the third reason why speciation takes place. And the fourth reason is geographical isolation. So what do you mean by geographical isolation? Geographical isolation is nothing but, suppose you have a beetle population. Okay, so you have lots of similar beetles. By chance, if there was any mountain, okay, the population got separated by a big mountain, or suddenly a river started flowing here, and that separated the two populations. Okay, so this becomes a different beetle and that becomes a different beetle, right? Both got separated. Okay, so when they got separated, certain level of changes or variations do occur in this population, and a certain level of variations starts occurring in this population. Okay, so different variations here, because the different climatic changes. Okay, so that actually gives you a different species, okay, over the years, over a period of time, and that itself we will call it as geographical isolation. That means the species get separated due to some rivers or mountains, and that way the speciation occurs further. So that is all about the reasons for speciation or how a speciation is caused. Okay, so definition is important, and all these reasons you have to mention with small explanation. Okay, so that is all about speciation. And now we will go for evidences for evolution. So we have 3 major evidences for evolution, and let's discuss about them. See, the first evidences, or we can also talk about tracing evolutionary relationship. Okay, so how one species is actually related to another species based on evolution. That itself we will call it as tracing evolutionary relationship. How do we get to know that one species is related to another species through evolution or based on evolution? That itself we will call it as evidences for evolution. So the first evidences that we discuss here is morphological evidences. Morphological evidences or anatomical evidences. So here we talk about two important concepts, guys, very important. One is homologous organs and the other one is analogous organs. Both are very important. You need to understand their definition as well as examples. So what do you mean by homologous organs here? So the organs which have same structural design is same but perform different function. Okay, so this is called homologous organs, right? So examples are the forelimbs of mammals, very important, forelimbs of humans, right? Birds, reptiles, or amphibians, that is frog. Okay, so the forelimbs of humans, birds, reptiles and frog, if you see, the structural design of a forelimb is similar in all the organisms, but their function is different. In case of humans, we use our hands for lifting, right? So for various purpose we use our hands, but in case of amphibians, they use forelimbs to jump. In case of lizards, they use their limbs to crawl, isn't it? Like that, different function you have, but the structural design is similar. Based on the similarity of their structural design, one can decide that they must have come from common ancestor, isn't it? So this is how you can trace the evolutionary relationship, how the different species are related based on evolution. That's what you can able to trace. Okay, so to trace we use something like homologous organs. So the next evidence that you can use is analogous organs. So what do you mean by analogous organs? So they are the organs which have different structural design, okay, but perform similar function. Okay, so such organs are called, analogous organ. For example, wings of birds and bat. Okay, so insects, birds and insects. So insects have wings, birds also have wings. To look at, the structure is very much different, but they use their wings, both in case of birds and insects, they use their wings for flying. So function is same but structure is different. So since they have a common function, so somehow we can think that they must have evolved from a common ancestor, isn't it? So this is another way of tracing evolutionary relationship between the different organism, right? And coming to the next evidence is paleontological evidences. Okay, paleontological evidences. So here we talk about the fossils. So what do you mean by fossils? Preserved traces of organisms. Preserved traces of organisms are called fossils, or imprints of dead organisms. Okay, so whenever an organism is dead, it gets imprinted in a soil. Okay, when it stays for a longer period of a time, its imprints, you will find it on the layers of soil. So such imprints or the dead remains of living organisms are called fossils. So one must find out, we can able to find how one organism is related to another by studying these fossils also, right? So that is the importance of fossils here. And we can determine the age of a fossil by two methods, guys. Okay, so here I am talking about how to determine age of fossils. So this is another important concept. So we can determine the age of fossils either by digging earth, okay, by digging, or we can use carbon 14 dating, okay. So when you go on digging a soil, you know, the recent fossil will stay on the topmost layers only. The more you dig, the more deeper you find the soil, the older it is, okay, because the oldest fossils you will always find in the deepest layers, right? So the older the fossil, more deeper you will find that on the in the earth, right? So that is how by digging one can able to find whether a fossil is recent one or older one, okay. And another method that we use to find the age of a fossil is carbon 14 dating. So what do you mean by this carbon 14 dating? It is a method where we find the ratios of isotopes present in a fossil. So by finding the ratios of isotopes in a fossil, one can able to find out how old the fossil is or how new the fossil is, okay. This is all about the fossil. So these are the three evidences or the methods that we use to trace the evolutionary relationship. They are homologous organs, analogous organs, and fossils. So one of the very important question I can say for board point of view, okay. So this is all about evidences of evolution or tracing evolutionary relationship between organisms. Now we will go for stages of evolution, okay. See, evolution is not a sudden process. So only in 1 or 2 generation you cannot observe or see a new species getting generated from older ones. Say it takes some million years, it takes some million decades, I can say, right? So it is a slow process and gradual process. So that is what we will learn with some examples. Let's understand how slow the evolution is actually based on some examples. First, let me discuss the evolution of eyes. So we all know how the eyes of humans are very complex, isn't it? So how do we get this complicated, sophisticated eye structure? So did we get this by a single variation? No. Okay, so let's understand how the eyes have been evolved. Okay, so initially in the primitive organisms, okay, so you know, when the earth got formed, we have observed only small unicellular organism. So they were called as very old or primitive microorganisms. So in the primitive organism, you don't have so-called eyes actually. Okay, so in the primitive organisms, you don't have eyes, but you can find just a dot on a body structure where this dot was not able to see the light, or it was not of a great help for a body to survive. Okay, so you can just find a spot. But later, after some million years, you know, we had seen a simple organism like planaria. So planaria is a kind of a flatworm, right? So this is planaria. Planaria upper body had 2 spots, okay? So they were called as rudimentary eyes. We call these spots as rudimentary eyes. You know, these rudimentary eyes have got an ability to detect light, okay. So now these dots have got an ability to detect the light. So somehow the organism has got some survival advantage because of these 2 dots, okay. So later, as the time goes on, so birds have evolved, right? So birds have evolved and they had got ball-like eyes. Okay, so ball-like eyes. And slowly, in case of humans, ultimately you will find binocular eyes. The most sophisticated eye structure is found in case of humans. Okay, so we can detect the light, we can able to see the things, we can able to sense the different things, right? So eyes, this organ eye is a great survival advantage for the species, right? But the eyes, this complicated eyes, the binocular eyes did not evolve with a single stage. I mean, It's a gradually we got this complicative eye structure in different species. Okay, so this is how the eyes have been evolved. Okay, and coming to the next example, evolution of feathers. Evolution of feathers. Actually, the long back dinosaurs had feathers, and they used their feathers for the purpose of insulation, just to cover their body, from cold. They used to use their feathers. But slowly birds are evolved from dinosaurs. Birds have got the feathers, and they used, along with the insulation, they used their feathers for flying. Okay, for flying. So this is how gradually the feathers have been evolved. And coming to the last example under this, artificial evolution. We have something called artificial evolution. So this is very, very important, guys. And this is not the evolution that occurred naturally in the nature. So this is the evolution done by a man. Okay, so artificial evolution is nothing but getting desirable traits, by changing DNA or genes artificially is called artificial evolution. Okay, for example, we had a natural plant called wild cabbage. So wild cabbage is a natural vegetable that we have, but man wanted to have a very different type of vegetable from this. He wanted to change its gene for betterment. Okay, so he wanted to change the gene in such a way that to have minimum spaces between the leaves. So he synthesized vegetable called cabbage. So in cabbage, you will observe less spaces between the leaves. So this is what the desirable character that he wanted, that a man wanted, he got it. And what is the new vegetable that he could make artificially? It is cabbage. So how did he made cabbage? By changing the DNA or gene in wild cabbage. Okay, so like cabbage, we can get many varieties from wild cabbage. That is broccoli. Okay, so broccoli is actually an arrested flower, non-movable flower. Okay, and we have got cauliflower from wild cabbage only. Cauliflower is called sterile flower. Okay, and we have got another vegetable, kale, and similarly we had got kohlrabi. Kohlrabi was having smaller body parts, and kale is the vegetable with larger leaves. And another vegetable where we have red cabbage, that means cabbage looks red in color. So these were the new artificial species, varieties that we had got from a natural variety, wild cabbage. So how did we get? By changing DNA. So these were the desirable characters man wanted. So he changed his DNA and he had got different vegetables. So this is what we mean by artificial evolution. Okay, so this is how evolution always happens by stages. It is not a sudden process. It's a very, very gradual and slow process. And final topic of the chapter, that is human evolution. So let us understand few things about human evolution now. See, it was said that humans were evolved in Africa, and the very primitive humans were called as Homo sapiens. Okay, so from Africa, it was said that they have migrated or they have shifted to different parts of the world. That is, few people, they have moved to Asia, and few of them have moved to Europe, or then Australia they have moved, or America, right? So they moved to and forth, and again they got mixed up, again they moved. That's how we have seen differences in the humans with respect to color, eye structure, face structure, etc. Okay, so but all humans have been originated from common ancestor, and where they have evolved, it was they were evolved in Africa. Okay, so this is something about the human evolution. And to study human evolution, there were some tools used. So tools used to study human evolution, that's important, guys. So this can be asked for 2 marks. So what were the tools used to study human evolution? One is excavating, and second one is time dating, and fossils. Studying fossils gave an idea about human evolution, and studying about DNA sequencing. So all these tools we can use to study human evolution. So nothing much to discuss about human evolution. If you can remember the different tools, that's more than enough. Okay, so that is all about the chapter, guys. Hope I have covered all the concepts in a brief way. If you want detailed aspects of these things, complete chapters playlist link is provided in the description. Don't forget to check it out. So hope you had a wonderful revision here. Don't forget to post your opinion in the comment section. And about the chapter, I will come up with important 4-mark questions as well as 1-mark questions. Okay, so I may release at least, or I may upload at least 2 chapters per week. So keep watching our channel and do a complete revision. So if you can start from now, you can definitely score wonderful mark in your board examination. All the best. Do subscribe our channel to learn the concepts in the easiest way and in a detailed way. Thank you so much. Meet you all with the next video, with the next chapter.